All right. Thank you, everyone, to our final gathering and event of the spring 2020 season of the Science Circle. I am Stephen Gager, Zootfly SL. I'm the president of the Science Circle Foundation Incorporated. We have been the new nonprofit entity behind the Science Circle since Chantel and the other Science Circle Foundation nonprofit, technically a Stichting in the Netherlands, has handed it off to us. So this season represented a new change in management and leadership, a little bit abrupt. So it's been a little bit of a rough ride. I have to say, we have the Science Circle webpage, but it's not editable at the moment, and that's going to be my summer project. So we decided to do something a little different than we normally do. A lot of times for the end of the spring, we'll have a fair. What we had today preceding this was an open house where you could visit the builds. But just as a reminder, you can come to the Science Circle and visit those builds anytime. Most of them have fairly straightforward descriptions of what they're about. There's a teleporter at the landing site to go visit them. So again, welcome to come by anytime and enjoy the science that we have here. We are an 18-year-old organization in Science Circle. We are, I would say, I'm going to call us the premier, science education and presentation group, NSL, having lasted the longest. Although we, of course, appreciate that there are other groups who do great things, and we love to work with and collaborate with everyone involved in this common purpose, this common mission of promoting science and education in a virtual world. So I want to talk today. We're going to just quickly do a couple things. What I want to talk about is the events review, let you know what's happening, a few acknowledgments, and then we'll begin with our forum. The Science Circle has Saturday presentations. We've been doing this for at least 16 years. I think the early parts we didn't have the Saturday series, but we've had scientists, other professionals involved in science adjacent or education related fields. We've been doing this continuously. We have about 40 speakers a year, 40 great events. These all get hosted on YouTube. So as a reminder, we do have a YouTube channel that you can check out with a variety of playlists. I will put that here into the local chat. We also have other events, though. So one thing is that every Sunday morning during the season, during the fall and spring season, we have a concert series, a mix put together by our concert master, Eel, every week. We also have Matt's Club, which meets on Thursdays at 4 o'clock. Again, that they shut down for the summer as well. Tagline, if you look to your right at the far end, Tagline, he has organized and runs that every week. And then we also have Moonbase Selene, which is a build project for making a simulation of living on the moon. And if you look at the middle chair, you'll see Phil Youngblood, but also to his left by 2 chairs, Sumo is helping organize that effort. And that meets on Mondays at 10 a.m. Second Life time. And that will continue through the summer. So if you're involved with that or want to get involved, anytime you can get involved, but it will be continuing over the summer. All right, I want to make some acknowledgments. The Science Circle has help from various people that get us, help us with organizing and the events. I've mentioned Moonbase. I've mentioned Matt's Club. I've mentioned the Concert Master. I want to mention a couple other people of note that, as you can see over here to the left, Skyer Gaia, he's our videographer. He has been a dedicated filmer since I want to say since 2022 or maybe 2021, and he gets all these posted up on YouTube. That way, it's such a wonderful thing to not just have these forums and attend live, but we now have an archive where anybody can see them anytime, and so that's a really valuable service. So let's give a quick round of applause for Skyer helping out with that. We also have two other.
Oh,
Well, yeah, awesome. Okay, we also have a website, and because of the transition and having to do technical aspects behind the scenes with that, I want to point out that Pliskin has helped and aided us get that moved and enabled, as currently still helping with getting it up and running and editable, and to a point where we can have that be a place where, one, we can point people to the YouTube, we can have our calendar, and then having a calendar is the best way to make sure everybody knows what's happening and where. And then also pointers to science and science education, and then also a place to host people's slides. So if you want, so when a presenter talks, it's wonderful when they actually have, a slide deck, and keep that as something people can reach as well. And biographies and profiles and what we do. So over the summer, my project will be to get that website up and running. So another notable, we are present on social media. I personally do a lot of this stuff with LinkedIn, but I also want to thank Sis Asymptote for being our manager on the Facebook group. He has been dedicated to getting that done every week, but also on top of making sure the events are well known, that he is posting. He's the most active at posting science stories. The Facebook group is actually a really nice place where we can have science discussions, some commentary. And again, it's something that you do have to apply to be in it, and then you have to be okayed by an admin. But if we know you, let me just put both the LinkedIn and the Facebook group in local chat. A reminder that that is a place where you can engage too. So let's give a round of applause to Gus and Syzygy. Really appreciate what they do for the group. All right. And then last organizational thing I want to just mention is that we have a new team member. So one of the essential parts of running and keeping in Second Life well organized is having an estate manager. And so the Hope here, who is the second chair to my left, she has agreed and volunteered to be the person filling that role. So the estate manager for the Science Circle is not, though, just about the region housekeeping. She will be a point person for all the builds that you see on the land here. She can help with that organization and the communication channel, the security and rules enforcement, but also region engagement. And so if everyone could please welcome Hope to that role. And again, you can see she has that title in her group. So thanks, Hope. Looking forward to working with you and helping us keep the land well maintained. All right. Just a quick mention that if anybody else wants to play a role in the Science Circle in a volunteering position, we're looking for people to help with events, with programming. We can also talk about fundraising or social events. So I sent out a note card on that recently. I'll send out again tomorrow. But if you want to organize anything for the summer, please let me know by Monday, July 6th, and we can organize advertising, and you can have access, and we can use the land over the summer. So with that, today's main event. We have a speakers forum. And again, one thing that I have been trying to promote as the new president of the Science Circle are maybe some more interactive, some audience engagement type of events. So we've had, panels revisited, and, we are trying to expand some of our programming as well. But one thing is, we love our audience, right? So we love the people that come every week. Oh. I toggled. Maybe that'll help with some people. Again, we appreciate that you guys come to these presentations every week, that you ask questions, sometimes are engaged in dialogue during the chat. So we aren't a Science Circle organization without our members. Hopefully all of you are in the students group. That way you can keep track of things. Actually, wait, let me brief pause. Hope, do you want to go ahead and set out one more chair? Because we have one of our speakers, Ariana, is now here. So Ariana, if you want to step up to the chair.
Yep, 1 sec.
All right. So, and it's great that you guys come and listen to and engage with our speakers every week. What I have up here is a listing of the topics that we had happen during the spring season. And so these are some of the topics and areas of science as well as science education that we've had. And, these are people who dedicate time and effort to making and preparing a talk. I do this too. It's not an easy amount of work. There's a bit of a heavy lift. You have to find and squeeze in time sometimes. And so let's really appreciate all of the speakers that we've had over the past years and recognize that they really do put in some great effort to make these things happen. But today, the main idea is let's just have a state of science conversation, right? These are experts. These are professionals. These are people who are in the know with things that are happening and comment on, I think, where we are, good and bad. We're definitely going to start and try and emphasize the good. So again, with questions or commentary for this first part, let's keep it positive for the first part. I know there's lots, and we can talk about that later. So what I'm going to do now is ask in order from, again, closest to me, and then going down the line to tagline, if each speaker could give a brief introduction of who they are, what they do related to their profession, a little bit about the one or multiple talks that they describe, just very briefly, the topics. And then when tagline is done, I'll have some prompt questions and we'll open it up to a state of science forum. So Meryl, on to you.
Well, thank you. I didn't realize I was going to be sitting here this morning. So I have no prepared notes particularly, but I've been a professor for over 40 years. So as you all know, professors can say anything at any time for any length. So my name is Meryl McBride in SL. My name is also Meryl, only Meryl Johnson. In RL, I'm a professor of geography, recently retired from Colorado State University. Before that, I was associate vice president for academic affairs and professor of geography at the University of New Orleans, where I got my start in Second Life back about 2006. I gave a presentation as a political geographer earlier this year on the nature of boundaries and how boundaries tend to be the source of political conflict in the world, always have, and I guess always will be. Before that, I did presentations on the nature of place in social virtual worlds, along with identity. That's another area of interest to me. But in terms of the state of science, let me focus on political geography. Political geographers right now are sort of in a state of panic, and more than one has probably gone to see a therapist because of the nature of the world. We've been taken back to a discussion of is geography is destiny, and political geographers always say, no, it's not. But given recent events in the world, we could look at Strait of Hormuz and say, well, maybe it is. We could look at the Taiwan Strait and say, well, maybe it is. And then there are other instances where we may want to fall back on that old chestnut that says that geography has a deterministic quality. I don't believe that, but it's fun to talk about and fun to explore. And so I'm willing to engage anybody who's interested in hearing about that in conversation. So enough from me. Let me defer to the person on my left.
Go ahead, Hope. Tell us about a little bit about yourself and what you talk about.
Okay, sorry about that. I pressed the wrong button. I'm Hope Botterbush in real life. Esperanza Freeze in Second Life for a long time. So since everybody got my first name wrong, I decided to change it to Hope. Anyway, on June 13th, I think it was, I gave a presentation on citizen science, advancing discovery through public participation. And the reason I felt like I could do that was because I've been an environmental science educator for a long time. I'm semi-retired right now, but when I worked at the University of South Florida College of Marine Science, I helped scientists put together educational programs for their grant projects that they were required to by National Science Foundation. So I helped them develop programs that involved the public and classroom teachers. So I gave a talk on citizen science, and basically it's where people who are, a lot of them are non-scientists, have developed programs that range from birds to whales to plants and animals, it could be any topic. And recently, some of the trends in citizen science are basically to use AI to assist the idea of various species. There's a shift toward community and research where citizens get involved in the research and report back to different agencies. And then there's also a surge in environmental and public health monitoring. So basically, citizens of any age can get involved in environmental projects, citizen science projects, health. It depends on what you're interested in. And my talk on the 13th, I had people take out their cell phones in real life and download an app called Merlin Bird ID, and we ID'd some birds that were outside their windows. You can also use it here in Second Life. So if you go to a nature preserve, say here in Second Life, just get your cell phone out and you can start identifying the birds that are inside Second Life. And that's a lot of fun. So you can do pretty much anything. So there are now several apps that you can download to your cell phone that will ID plants and animals and fungi and whatever you want to ID. So that was my talk. And I'm really involved in my own citizen science projects in my retirement as well. I just think it's a really great way to stay involved and active in science. Thank you.
Day, floor is yours.
Okay, I think my mic is working. I reactivated again. So I'm Day Miami, Bill Schmachtenberg in real life, and I gave a talk on evolution in the trilobite Triarthris. A little recap on that. Basically, my research parallels that of Dr. Chris McRoberts at SUNY Cortland. Over a 7 million year time span, I'm seeing in trilobites. They're sort of like crabs, lobsters, that the eyes in these animals got bigger. They rotated from about 5 to 10 degrees, and the field of view increased. And the basic argument was that these animals were living in a deep ocean basin on the margin of North America, and they were dealing with predators, most likely shelled cephalopods like shelled squids. So that was the gist of what I was talking about. In terms of where it's going, a couple of things. First of all, the director of the Virginia Museum of Natural History wanted a curriculum on teaching evolution at the K-12 level that now exists. It's been uploaded to the Virginia Department of Energy website as lesson plans for biology teachers to use. The other thing that's going on at the Virginia Museum of Natural History is there is an exhibit on my trilobites planned sometime next year, which is going to be really cool to the public. The other thing is I talked to the curator, and what I'm trying to do is get all the scaled images. I had 100 at the time of the talk. I'm up to about 150 now, and I have an appointment with the Dr. Lisa Mahdi at the New York State Museum to get even more images. But the idea is to not just have them stored in my Google Drive, but to get them online so that anybody that wants to conduct research on this trilobite, which is so famous, can just go to a website or whatever and pull it down. And a good example of that, I just got a student at Virginia Tech, Luke, that some of you know about, is going to be doing some research with me. And he wants to work on a similar trilobite called Portophilia in Virginia. Mine are in New York for the most part, and look at relationships between Triarthris and Portophilia. And I met with him on Zoom and said, get as many Portophilia as you can, and you're welcome to go into my database and get images of Triarthris. So there's an example of another researcher, albeit an undergraduate student, who wants to extend my research. Okay, but he doesn't have to drive all over New York like I did to Cortland and all around Ithaca to get these images. They'll be available online. They're in my Google Drive, so they're already available. So the idea of sort of globally sharing these images so that further research can be done is what I'm interested in. And that's where I'm at now.
Okay, and actually, I do, since you mentioned it, I do want to point out that we, Day is working with someone who is interested in becoming a speaker for the Science Circle, or at least Day is interested in getting him to be a speaker.
He
So,
said he was going to log in. I haven't got an account on him yet.
all
But
right.
I said, dude, as soon as you do, and you got some research, I got all kinds of venues to present. So I've been pushing it, and he said he wants to do it. So I'll keep pushing him to come on.
Yeah, and so a reminder, if you're a professional in this field and want to give a talk, we're always happy to help get you set up. But if you can recruit people for us, that would be great too. If there's somebody like, wow, they do great stuff, let's have them get it out there for the Second Life audience and YouTube. All right, thanks, Day. Phil, tell us about what you did.
Okay, I had a couple of the presentations this spring and also the 2020 Revisit panel, but they're very different, which kind of speaks to my eclectic interests. One was on Artemis 2. We have a moon-based group that meets every Monday, has been for 3 years, and so it's living and working on the moon has become a real topic. And if you look, for example, if you get National Geographic, which was the one thing that my wife and I could not give up when we met 35 years ago. We both have our own subscription, but it's becoming a real thing. But this month, it's all about living and working in space on the moon and Mars. And so Artemis 2, we keep up on what's going on. And I presented on Artemis 2 and what they were doing there and in the past exploring the moon. The other one I did was the Enduraic. Well, I think so. And that's part of the reason why I put that up there is the science is kind of a boundaryless endeavor, even in the worst of times. And politically, scientists still talk to each other. It's one thing I really admire about the field. And so I also did one on Enduraic basins. simply because I had no idea what they were. I saw a picture of a big salt flat, and my curiosity piqued, and I looked it up, and they're called endorrheic basins, where water flows in but does not flow out. It has no outlet to the sea. And so I was looking up what it's like, and the fact that there are 20% of the surface of the earth are basins like that, which do not have outlets to the sea. And so they're very hyper saline in some instances and present their own issues as far as ecosystems and stuff. So I like to present on lots and lots of different types of topics. And that's essentially what I did this spring as well. And on to Stephen.
Okay, there I am. Always good to follow after Phil. He brings enlightenment to the room that I get to bask in. Thank you so much, Phil. You know, I have been presenting, I don't know how many years in Second Life now. I lose count. It's like 20 now, or something like that, mostly about technology and how technology can make our lives so much better in so many ways. But today I'm feeling brokenhearted in what I see happening with AI in my various institutions. I've taught for UCLA, UCSB, National University, California Lutheran, and a number of others. And first of all, I have this automatic cringe too. And anybody starts talking about AI, I think, oh God, one more donkey braying about it. So please bear with me for just a second. I have a long history in watching how educational tech has hopefully lifted us up, but I gotta say, well, for example, the very first online hybrid course at UCSB was simply a discussion board we brought in so the international students wouldn't feel so lonely over the weekend. And it used to be we were using this tech as a bridge for human connection, but today I see it. It's been an eviction notice for the human intellect. Students are no longer being challenged. They're not interacting with one another on a human level. We're being told that academia is evolving, but really, I think the truth is much uglier than that. From what I see, academia has completely surrendered because colleges, they're not selling education anymore. They're holding degrees hostage. This is what I'm seeing. And they're trading on a legacy of credentialing, monopoly, running this economic racket while automating away the very substance of learning. And I know you want to keep this positive, Stephen. So here it is. There is a silver lining that I see. And it may be that the administrators have surrendered, but the students have not. And they are openly booing AI commencement speakers off the stage, and they're filing class action lawsuits against these algorithmic classrooms, and they are demanding the real thing. Another way we can tell it's really bad right now at the university is they're eagerly asking us instructors for suggestions on how to salvage the situation. And that's when you know things are getting really bad, when they turn to the instructors. And finally, I just want to say, students I see right now are actively fighting for their right to a human education. And I think it's time we stop acting like tech brokers and simply how to teach. And thank you for letting me burp that out today.
Well, Steve, I think, yeah, you really point out one of the major topics that we have going on that's disrupting society today, and in particular education. I am continually amazed at sometimes the sensibilities of the younger generation, and I think they're standing up for themselves in certain ways, in ways that some of us have not done before in previous generations. So I look forward to this. I look forward to what's going to happen, actually. Again, so Sumo has to jump out and relog to get her voice back. So tagline, do you want to take and tell us about your talk and yourself, and then if Sumo's back, we'll get started with the Q&A.
I'm a retired physician, and I had a lot of experience dealing with head and neck cancer surgically. and it's part of interdisciplinary care for patients with head and neck cancer, as well as some disorders of thyroid. And I did a lot of ear surgery as well, reconstructive ear surgery. And but aside from that, I was originally a mathematician, and I don't know, my family didn't seem to respect anything about being good in mathematics. It's the easiest thing I ever did, in a way. So people often don't appreciate what comes easy. So at any rate, I ended up pursuing questions I have about why and how we exist. And that's been my driving force in life. I joined about 12 years ago, Second Life here. I was reluctant to because of all the
Yeah, tagline. I hope you can still hear us. You just cut out.
testing one. Okay, I'm sorry. This has been happening to me. Thank you for letting me know. I joined about 12 years ago. First person I met, one of the first people I met was Chantal. I looked for science-based stuff, and Science Circle came up, and she was around, and we had conversations, and she was, I thought, very gracious and intelligent individual. So I thought this looked promising for, yeah. It's not easy in life to find people you can talk to, and who have interests more than their dogma or their, you know, shallow, banal schlock that they do. So, at any rate, that's how I came to Second Life and to Science Circle, and I've given a number of talks on various things. I guess one of the first things I talked about in Science Circle was statistics, binomial theorem, and binomial distributions, and the relationship to normal distributions and statistics. I had too much difficulty at first figuring out the timing of stuff. I tended to go way over. I've gotten much better at that, but at any rate, I presented a number of things in mathematics. One time I presented the Cantor-Schroeder-Bernstein theorem, where if you have two sets, they can be two infinite sets. And if you have a one-to-one mapping from one set A to set B, and a different one-to-one mapping from set B to into set A, then you can say that set A and set B have the same cardinality. In other words, the same infinity of elements are in set A that are in set B. And if you don't know, I'll point out there are an infinite different levels of infinity. There are infinitely more points on the real number line than there are counting numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a kind of Elfmore, as it's called. But I also presented a couple of high school girls that were quite talented in Louisiana, discovered a novel and clever original proof after all these years of the Pythagorean theorem, and we presented it. And I think that went well. People enjoyed it and seemed to follow it. And I presented a number of things in that are medically oriented, presented on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is pretty prevalent. 2 to 5% of Americans have it. It's related to eating processed food and wrecking your microbiome. Okay, I'm going to cut it short here, but at any rate, that was a medically oriented talk. I talked about the Nipah and Hendra virus, which come from fruit bats, one of them through horses, that are highly lethal in Southeast Asia and Australia. And I'm sort of proud of this. On the 20th of January 2020, the first documented case of COVID occurred in the United States. And I think around the 8th of February, I had already arranged for a presentation about a novel or a new virus from Wuhan, China, and gave a talk about that based largely on, I've written a book chapter in the past about viruses of the respiratory tract. And so I was familiar with coronavirus. And at any rate, it's the first talk I was aware of anywhere in the United States on COVID. So that happened right here. And let's see. I guess that's pretty much it. I cover a lot of things that interest me, and that's I try to keep it real. And I talk too much, so I should shut up now, I think.
Yeah, no, Tagline has definitely shown himself
in China, but the first documented case in the United States was January 2020. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tagline. Yeah, you've definitely been our speaker who's been on the forefront of various viruses or ailments, and appreciate your medical background. All right, so Sumo's back. Sumo, if you want to do a brief introduction, then we'll do Baragon and go from there.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm Sumo Atano in Second Life, Madeline Foster in real life, retired faculty member in chemistry at Lehigh University, where I did research on site-specific contrast enhancement agents for MRI imaging. Here in Second Life, I've given a talk that's listed on the slide on chemistry and Star Trek. I'm not going to mention that today because chemistry and Star Trek hasn't changed that much since the time I gave that talk. Back in the spring, in the fall, however, I gave a talk on development in antibiotics. And that's the one I kind of like to just want to mention briefly again today. And I put in a few slides just so I don't have to say too much. And since the talk was a while ago, I wanted to remind everybody of what the basic subject was. Bottom line is, I personally think that resistance to antibiotics is one of the big problems we have now in science and medicine. And I got interested in the impact of AI on drug development and discussed the situation surrounding a drug called now called Halcyon that was really rather unprecedented in its discovery, because it really relied very heavily on the paradigm shift toward AI and drug discovery in terms of its design. And one of the reasons that pharmaceutical companies have gone away from developing antibiotics is because just the discovery process takes so incredibly long. And Halcyon was literally discovered in 3 days. So you're taking a scientific endeavor that typically takes up to 10 years and getting it done in 3 days. That's an amazing change. And I wanted to just give you an update on what's going on with Halcyon now. Not only has it been shown to exhibit activity against a variety of problematic diseases and bacteria, it's also been shown to have effectiveness against quite a few other things. And primarily that's thought because of its rather unique structure that the AI model came up with, and it was a structure that had never been seen before in pharmaceuticals. It's now really established as a promising therapeutic candidate with the potential for applications that exist well beyond just the crisis that I described in antibiotic and microbial resistance. And then what, pardon me, what popped up today that I also want to alert you, literally today in a feed I get that I wanted to drop in here was of all things, the Motley Fool, which is an investment advice um, area. I'm not giving investment advice here, but I just wanted to point out that they are talking about a company called Generate Biomedicines. That is a biotech firm, but not in the usual sense. They have developed a platform, as the slide says, that digitally tests how a prospective drug molecule might perform as a treatment for a particular disease. And this is not just an idea they have. This is a company that is up and running with this platform, and they have launched already the development of 3 real drugs that are in clinical trials. And this latest update comes as of this month in 2026. They have 4 drug candidates in their pipeline that are into phase 3 clinical testing. This is an incredible, I hate to use a phrase that we used before, but I will, paradigm shift, because lots of time is not wasted, but time was required and money was required to do this sort of development. And this company, by applying AI techniques, has vastly increased the rate of discovery and decreased the cost of delivery of new drugs to the marketplace. General analysis now says that AI discovered drugs are about twice as likely to succeed in phase 1 trials as drugs that begin clinical trials without prior virtual testing. And this concept of virtual testing, I think, has a chance of absolutely revolutionizing what goes on in drug development. So let's keep posted. But that's the point I wanted to make today about what's going on in the area that I discussed just probably 9 months ago, and it has changed radically. And again, I'm not giving investment advice, but we ought all keep in mind this company called Generate Biomedicines and what they're doing. Other than that, that's all I'll say, because I wanted to just indicate this new development that literally just crossed my desk this morning, and I thought we should all know about it. So thanks a lot for listening, and if there are any questions, I'll be as glad as anyone on the panel vehicle to answer them. But thank you so much for this opportunity, and I really thank the Science Circle for bringing us all together.
Thank you, Sumo. Baragon, you want to close us out? With introductions, that is.
Hello, is this thing on?
Can you?
All right. Yes, this is Baragon. So thank you for inviting me to this panel, Stephen. So you all might remember me from last week, where we talked about the paradigm shifts that Sumo just mentioned, and so I have been involved with the Science Circle for many years, it feels like. You may remember about 5 years ago, I used to host, or I hosted a series of panel discussions where I would invite sort of subject matter experts to come and present about topics that I was interested in here at the Science Circle. And those are still up on YouTube, by the way, on the Science Circle YouTube channel. So feel free to take a look at those. In fact, the paradigm shift that we did last week was actually an update of one of those panel discussions that I did back, I guess, Stephen, was that in 2020 rather? Anyway, So I'm happy to be back involved with the Science Circle, and I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm pretty much just a layperson, but I do really enjoy learning about all the topics that we discuss here at the Science Circle. So really happy to be participating in it. I would also just quickly, I guess, mention that when I've been in Second Life almost 20 years now. It's just hard to believe. And one of the first things I did when I joined was get plugged into the Science Friday sim, which I guess so back in 2008, NPR and Science Friday actually had a gigantic a footprint here in Second Life where they had an entire sim for attendance and a second adjacent sim because the Science Friday crowds were so big they had to have overflow space. Um, but when the Lindens canceled the nonprofit discount, I think mainly for land, uh, NPR left Second Life, and so did Science Friday. And so then we continued to gather to listen to Science Friday for years after that. We had, you know what? Rather than explain this, if you look in my profile in my picks in the science tab, you can find the interview that I did with Science Friday. Science Friday actually interviewed me, and I go through that whole history of Science Friday and what happened and what's going on with it. Short, so cutting to the chase here, Science Friday still meets in Second Life. I ended up actually running the Science Friday group, and we still meet here. So you all are, it's on Friday. We listen to the live radio broadcast. So if any of you are interested in that, related to that, one of the regions where we used to listen to Science Friday also used to broadcast the BBC science program, The Naked Scientists, which was out of Cambridge University in the UK. Then that became a problem because what I attribute to Brexit, the BBC made it impossible to listen to the live radio broadcast of The Naked Scientists outside of the UK. So this forced us to listen to the podcast of The Naked Scientists, which forced me to become a DJ because I had to download the podcast as an MP3 and then stream that MP3 into Second Life. So that's how I became a DJ. And we still do that. It turns out that the BBC eventually cut its ties with with Cambridge University and the Naked Scientists. So they now operate as kind of a standalone sort of a sponsor-driven podcast. But we still get together and listen to it every week at the same place that we do Science Friday. So just keep all of that in mind. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to I'm not sure that everyone is aware that those things are still going, that those groups are still active here in Second Life because the attendance is very small. I get like a half a dozen people to these things. But like the membership of the Science Friday group is gigantic. It's hundreds of people, but only like 6 people show up to the actual program, which is hard because it's in the middle of the day in the afternoon on Friday. People are working, but still, just wanted to make sure people are aware of that. I also should mention to explain my avatar that a giraffe got loose in Texas this week and was like missing for 2 weeks. And there was a lot of memeing about it on the internet about how can you lose a giraffe. Anyway, they found Gracie the giraffe yesterday, and so I now am wearing a giraffe. And my giraffe came with both the head giraffe and the little companion giraffe, and I like both of them, so I decided not to have to decide, so I'm just wearing both of them. So that's why I have giraffes. Gracie the giraffe. All right. Anyway, thank you, Stephen. That's all for me. Bye-bye.
Cool. Thanks, Baragon. And actually, so yeah, like, thank you all for the introductions. I think, you guys are doing something that we need more of, which are people getting out there and helping to promote science, that science is a great thing, to be an advocate for it, and then communicate that. And I think, Baragon points out something what do people think about the state of science communication and science education in the country today? So if you have a comment on that, let me know, or if you want to put something in local chat. I'm gonna spontaneously ask Stephen Van Hook up here at the top to maybe comment a little bit more on that in terms of state of science. What do you think about the state of science communication?
Well, first of all, I've always appreciated that Second Life has made me feel welcome. I'm not a hard scientist. I'm a soft, squishy scientist in education communications. So and I really do appreciate that. So those of you that are thinking you'd like to join in on this, but you're not really a hardcore scientist, I'd say, boy, is this a welcoming group. And I wish I could say I'm hopeful about education in general. I'm very hopeful about science, Stephen. And as you may know, in the very worst of times around the world, scientists have always held a protected space. In the Soviet Union, it was physicists. So I'm very hopeful that we recognize deep in our core that science is such an essential part of everything. And I hope we're able to find educational models that bring it to us, hopefully in a more democratic and affordable way.
Ask you, Meryl, following up. You've been in the formal education business for a long time. What do you see that is positive about how science can be communicated in the modern world?
Well, education is going through quite a big change. It has been for the last decade or so, if not longer. And the delivery system for education has changed dramatically. No longer is it exclusively sage on the stage, but now we have to have all sorts of technological innovations involved. When I first started teaching 40-some years ago, I was a high-tech professor because I dragged an overhead projector to class. Well, that's sort of quaint when you think about it today. So we're dealing with massive changes in the technological environment, and it's sort of a conceptual environment in terms of how education should be done. And yes, Stephen is correct about the manner in which education is slow to respond. That's always been a big concern of mine, that a lot of educators don't want to acknowledge what's happening, and as a consequence, they get left out in some very unhealthy ways. But in terms of communication, how we're communicating, whether it's science, whether it's something other than science, the principle, the idea that I think undergirds any conversation that we have about communication is how the nature of communication has changed. And we don't have to accept it all. We don't want to accept it all. We don't want to embrace it all because it's not always good. But we have to acknowledge it's out there, and we have to adapt our messages to that. One big I don't know if it's a concern. One big challenge I've had over the years is how do we handle online education? In my younger years, I did battle with university senates and so forth about online education. Personally, I prefer face-to-face. I prefer staring down those 18-year-old freshman students who came to class swaggering in, taking their seat, and letting everybody know that because they just graduated from high school, they know everything. Okay, I love that type of student. That was a lot of fun. You don't get that with online education. And there are other things that we miss with online education. However, online education is really telling us about what's happening in that technological world that's affecting education at large. It's a new delivery system. We have to adapt in new ways, whether it's science we're talking about or any other subject area. We have to accommodate the fact that it may be true, as one person said about 15 years ago, 30 years from now, the university will be contained in a briefcase. And so are we prepared to handle that in terms of how we communicate science and everything else to students? I could go on for a long time, obviously, about the subject, but let me stop there.
No, I think it's good, and I would love to revisit this topic in the future for the group of the change of what colleges do and what they're good for and what they're really about, and the social changes, especially brought on by technology. And so, Sumo highlighted something, um, technology and AI and computer algorithms in the field of chemistry and pharmaceuticals, and Steve mentioned that for college students. you know I want to come back to day and tagline, and I was wondering if either of you would like to comment about, given that you guys are in some very classic and slow to shift fields like medicine and archaeology, what do you guys think about some of the AI effects that we're seeing for people and how it affects your field? Let's start with Day.
AI, I'm retired. So I retired before AI hit, so I'm not sure I'm really the best to talk about this. Um, when I first started playing with Chat GPT, I wasn't impressed. It was giving me a bunch of gibberish. Um, I think that there's a couple of the thing that excited me the most at VWBPE was Google Storybooks. I played around with that and was impressed about how AI could be used to generate kids' books. They even generated one on teaching kids how to do principal components analysis, which was spot on with both the technique and also the way it was portrayed to young children. It was called the Firefly Map, and gave a little story about a kid going through a forest and firing these fireflies, and they're all randomly moving around, and the magician appears, and his magic wand shows the main axis, where these things are flying. I think it was just incredible that a machine came up with this idea to both portray the technique but also explain it at a level that maybe kids could understand. So I'm not the best person to talk about AI. And I hate to say it, I've got a commitment now at 2:00, so I've got to run. But thank you all for inviting me, and wish you all a good summer and come back in the fall.
See you in the fall, Dave. Thanks for coming, contributing. Um, Tagline. Well, so Dave comments on something that reminds me a little bit of my teaching days, and Merrill hits on this too. Is some of the practitioners they may not be ready and eager to do things in a new way, and that's very understandable because that can be a lot of an adjustment, and you can actually make your teaching worse if you do it the wrong way. So I think that's worth appreciating. Tagline, do you want to talk a little bit about AI in medicine?
Yes, just as an aside, I entered a comment in the nearby chat about Mathematics Club, which after discussion with Chantal started in March of 2023. And we'll have session 117 on Thursday, the 17th of September. That'll be the next one. So you might find it fun. I hope you'll consider coming. In terms of medicine is extremely conservative and experiential. And I think there's been a significant shift from classical education and medicine, where you had most physicians were pretty good diagnosticians, and didn't mean they didn't miss diagnoses sometimes, but that can happen to anyone, I guess. But if you talk to them, they could, these older guys, they were older than me. And I think it persisted through my generation. They could tell you about complications from medications and side effects that were drug interactions, and they had more in-depth understanding. And they didn't necessarily just think about the easiest quick diagnosis. the problem, medicine has been like public education, kind of tortured by the expectations of people who are not involved in it so much, or by people who want to make money from it. It's been turned into like a corporate enterprise and a for-profit activity, and the doctors are and the physicians assistants are employees, and the people that are counting the beans want to see what's called throughput, and they want the charts so that they're not behind, but they look complete. They have, it's all computerized. And what I began to see in the end of my career was I would get records from other doctors that were absolutely worthless because they were full of defaults that from the computer program that generated the report that you couldn't trust that they'd actually asked about it or done it, and as a part of the exam, and it was just like what do they call it, a boilerplate report, and because if they charge a certain level, they have to have justification for it by all this bureaucracy that they've done all these tests and things. So dotting the I's and crossing the T's becomes more important than the content. So the newer doctors seem to be interested in leaving at 5 o'clock and not being called and not being bothered. It's a whole different culture now. And I think AI may help in some ways in that I don't think that the younger doctors think about differential diagnoses in an analytical way. I don't carry it around in their minds. And AI might give them pause to think. But I think the other side of the other edge of that blade is that AI might end up generating, being a tool to generate perfunctory reports so that they look like they're doing their job and doing it quickly so they could push people out the door. And the other thing that I don't think AI is going to help with is there's a tendency in at least in the UK and certainly in the United States, people get mid-70s and beyond, and the doctors lose interest. They start to think, well, they pretty much hit their life expectancy, regardless of level of function or any of this sort of thing. So my advice to you in this day and age is don't get sick. I'm not sure AI is going to make it better. It will in some ways, but I also see it becoming a tool for what I consider to be a slacker approach to taking care of human beings. So that sounds pretty negative. I'm sorry, but that's
No, Tagline, I think you highlight a really important thing about AI in that AI does some things really well and can be an aid, and some things that people are trying to they apply it to things where they think it does well, or they're just trying to try and make it a shortcut or something cheaper for themselves. And so I think, AI is a conversation we're going to keep coming back to, I think, for the foreseeable future. And I think these discussions are good for saying, what do we do or don't want it to do? I do want to say one thing real quick is that to me, AI is something where we may be able to use it to help enable more people be involved in the science circle and to help engage in debates and to help address certain language barriers. So one person who's here in the audience who gave a talk but is not up front is Ariane, and she gives a statement saying, "I'm from Japan." Here, I participate as a student, but in real life, I work in the medical field, and I've also taught student nurses as a teacher. Since I'm not confident in speaking English, I am using text-to-speech software. I apologize for communicating through chat today, as I do not have a speaking system prepared today. I had a presentation here twice before. The first time was about the supercomputer supercomputer K 6 years ago. And the second time, and that was just a few weeks ago, was about polio eradication. And she's very glad, I'm quoting, I'm very glad to have those opportunities. It is unfortunate that there are so few participants from Japan, but the language barrier remains a major challenge. I would also like to add that I am a member of the Lunar Base Project, a role I regard in high honor. Thank you. And again, I want to point out that, Ariana used a text-to-speech technology in order to deliver something that she prepared primarily in her native language and then delivered it to us in English. And so, again, great examples of technology. AI can be used for real-time voice to either chat or voice-to-voice real-time translation. So we're hoping to try and advance some of these to get more participation, more engagement, but we appreciate pioneers like Ariane helping out with that. So coming to that, so let me come to you, Phil. I mean, you've been in the education and virtual worlds field for a while. You're a technology adopter type person. What do you think about technology and science and education these days? In brief, in brief.
In brief, after 9 minutes after the hour. Yeah, I've been working with science and technology since the 60s at least, and I'm chair of the Computer Science Advisory Council for a local university, and have a PhD in computers and one in education, and blah 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 blah. The big thing is this too shall pass. Okay, science and education have been around a lot longer than any politician, and it will continue to be around. And frankly, scientists and educators work their salt, don't pay much attention to politics. Although they do have to have money. That's about it. That I wrote several things in chat, and one of the last things is essentially AI is no better than a good researcher, just a bit quicker. You still have to look at the sources of the evidence and conclusions rather than just accepting everything at face value. And that's essentially what AI is. I mean, it can't make up stuff. It has to look around, and it can hallucinate. It can make up false conclusions and that sort of thing. But we still have to be smarter than the computer or whoever is spouting the propaganda at the time. So I got into education and computing and everything else like that because it is boundaryless, and it will be here, and it's kind of the hope and science and stuff, and it's kind of the hope and best face of humanity rather than some of the other stuff. Psychics are people too. If we ever get generative AI.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to that illustration I used of that drug Hallicin. That is a totally new, never before seen type of drug that is behaving in a way that is teaching people something about intermolecular interactions at the medicinal biochemical level. I think I think AI is not just as you described it, being a tool that just picks and chooses from what already exists. I mean, generative AI is, quite frankly, I think really powerful, and because of that, also really scary. But I think that halcyon drug analogy is something that you have to, it's like you can feed AI all the pictures in the world about four-legged mammals, and then you can say, generate for me what you think a six-legged mammal would look like. And it can create something like that too, but I agree absolutely. That's why you need human oversight and human creativity and human interaction.
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
think AI
I mean, one
is
of the
pretty
things
amazing.
I found, over the years as I get older is that I don't have to be the last person to speak on a topic. In other words, I listen to what you're saying and value it, and I don't have to rebut it.
Yeah, no, I think in the field that I'm in with genome engineering and thinking about agricultural traits for seed companies and whatnot, under the hood, there are amazing things that AI helps enable and make happen better. So pretty amazing when you think about the appropriate right use, because it is a very novel tool with its quote unquote thinking and trend discovery that other things don't do quite that well.
Yeah, we just have to make sure that we realize. I mean, I'm a computer programmer. I started programming in 1968. And you just have to realize that AI is a computer program. Okay. It may come to some interesting conclusions based on throwing together everything it sees, and coming up with what looks like imaginative ideas that maybe we wouldn't come up with because we wouldn't think they're logical or whatever. But then we have to be logical enough to look at the ideas and say, okay, yeah, this works, this doesn't, and this is just fiction.
Because somebody mentioned Anthropic back in the discussion a few hours ago. Humanity has to bring ethical considerations to this. And that's one of the things that Anthropic has been so concerned about as a company. Human beings have got to be there to be responsible and add an ethical dimension to this. And even though certain computer systems can come up with things like I described with Halcyon, there's no ethical underpinning to manage those things.
All right. Well, I think what I want to do right now is pause to consider again that we thank our speakers, those who are present, as well as those who weren't able to make it today that have contributed to the Science Circle's mission of discussing, communicating, advocating for science. I want to thank you all for being here. We look forward to keeping on this tradition and keeping it going for as many years as we can with your and the audience, as well as speaker presentation. So thank you all. We are closed for the season. We will continue again formally beginning in the fall. And so look for my asking you to help participate. Thank you all. Okay, so I put in a closure to make sure that we had a good ending for the videographer, that we can close the video archive. But we can stick around for as long as people want to have a conversation. So thank you. I sincerely appreciate everyone being here and participating. But if you want to go on for a little bit longer, if you have any specific questions, feel free to stick around. If you need to go, just get going. Cheers, Hope. Yes. Oh, yeah. And Phil, just a quick reminder. I think I'm going to put out a notice tomorrow and or Monday about the summer schedule, but I think you're going to be on your own for advertising that. Okay. So we have a question. Oh, sorry. Question again. Adaptation from NeuroWonder. Obviously, adaptation is important. How much responsibility should science professors take on with respect to the TikTok generation? Oh, God, such a great question. Meryl, tell me you're not leaving yet. But also,
I have a few minutes.
All right. Why don't you take that question as your last part? What do you think about TikTok and new social media modalities and what professors, in particular science or professors, should do
Well,
about it?
oh God, it's probably about time now for that bottle of whiskey and pistol. I don't know what. I'm not a social media type of person, and I even sort of gave up on Facebook some time ago because some of the stuff I was reading and so forth. I think social media, as a social scientist, I would say that social media offers quite a bit of risk for people as they think about what's going on in the world around them. And I know that there are scientific areas that use Facebook and TikTok and all the other as a part of their pedagogical work, and that's fine. I'm not against that, but my larger fear is that social media is becoming a way not to inform as much as to indoctrinate, and that's when it gets very difficult for university faculty and education in general to do the work that they need to do in educating. But as I say, I'm sort of a bad authority when it comes to the relevance of that sort of thing to education.
Well, as a
That was
former,
a non-answer.
I want to echo. Some of what you had to say is that when colleges are being paid for and are a certified professional organization to do education, they're not really obligated. And I don't think the professors should feel obligated to have to be out there in the public sphere. And let's face it, a lot of people get in trouble, sometimes fairly, a lot of times unfairly, and your job becomes at jeopardy because you said something this or that or some certain way, and people call for you to get fired. So I think there's a real danger, but I do want to echo that I think there's an underlying concern, which is, should professors and professionals still try and be out there at some level to advocate for science and education and rational thinking? And there's got to be some sort of balance in there, right?
Yeah. No. I think that's part of the education process. We're trying to help students understand what makes sense, what does not make sense. And as a social scientist, I want to help students understand that what mass movements are all about, and what behaviors are dangerous in terms of their abandonment of logic, reason, and just common sense. So when it comes to that, I think that the education world has an obligation to speak truth to power and to talk about what good thinking is. Now, none of us wants to go in and say, you have to believe this. And sometimes college professors get in trouble because they go in and say, well, it's right to believe this way. And so in those cases, I say, no, please don't. Please don't put yourself out there in a situation that is going to create. It's going to lead to more things that are bad than are good. And I'm not sure you're teaching students how to think so much. So it's a fine line. Yeah. Professors can't just check their beliefs in at the door when they go into class. On the other hand, we got to be very, very careful how what we say, what we advocate in class comes across as advocacy. And when and that gets in trouble. I'm hesitating a lot here because we live in an environment right now politically where anything that represents an attempt to contradict what's being set out in front of us as proper belief is leads it can be dangerous, and I really, really resent that. But I've been in situations at other times where a faculty member have come out and they've made a statement that really should not have been made to the students, because it suggests that students have to believe in a certain way to succeed in the class. That's my point.
Yeah, no, there definitely are the biases that still exist within professionals, and some of those can be pretty off the beaten path. I think I do want to come back to something Neuro mentions, which is academia should be a safe zone for both students and professors. And I'm going to partly agree with that and partly disagree that it definitely needs to be a safe place to develop and explore thinking and critical thinking and discovering new knowledge. On the other hand, also not be safe in that if there are things that are challenging our personal held beliefs that are not based on an education, or education can help inform beliefs beyond feelings, it should not be safe. And so I think there's an interesting balance. I think professional educational institutions need to understand what their focus is and be ready to stand by them.
Okay, safe zone. We could talk about that for a long time. And in the abstract, I say, yes, it's nice for universities to be safe zones. I'm not going to dispute that. But what do we mean by safe? In other words, if you talk about economics, there are a lot of faculty members in a Department of Economics in a business college that are going to have what they understand to be truth. That is not the truth of a lot of faculty members in a sociology or a philosophy department. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. We have to be very careful. And we can't assume that our truths are the truths that are going to be acceptable to everybody. Here's where the safe zone largely applies. Most university campuses have free speech corners where students and faculty and others can get up and advocate for a certain position without fear of recrimination. And okay, I think that's good.
Let me type in just for a second. I don't think educational. I would love to, in an idyllic world, for educational institutions to be a safe zone, but they never will be, because people know that that's where that is where young people hang out, and the politicians and other people that want to control thought will never let educational facilities be a safe zone, because that's where minds are formed. And that's why they're also, frankly, scared of educational institutions. And it's one of the first places they attack is because in an idyllic situation, it is a place that people can talk about things freely. In reality, of course, that never happens.
I'd like to add something here, maybe just for a moment. I see a lot of analogies between what education is facing now and what journalism has been facing over the past X number of years. And, journalism has changed incredibly. Think about 20 years ago, what the role of newspapers was compared to now. I think the university system, I think higher education, I think education in general is going to be experiencing a lot of changes over the next couple of years. And I obviously have no crystal ball. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I think this is an incredibly important discussion to have. Well, original journalism, I'm talking about, real, what I will call real journalism, just like one would, poor education too, you could say that. But I think there's a system that defines sort of what journalism is and how it behaves, just as there is one for education. And I'm just saying, I think both of those are undergoing some major shifts now. And that's why I just think this is an incredibly important discussion.
Well, journalists were essentially news researchers, okay? That in theory, the best newspapers and magazines and journalists and stuff actually looked for education evidence and multiple sources and vetted their material and stuff, and they weren't just opinion influencers like a lot of them are today.
Yeah, that's actually to me one of the most interesting parallel or maybe kin professions to being a scientist is a journalist, right? I mean, it's one of these same types of, or even like a detective, right? There's this real search and skepticism and trying to sort stuff through for truth, which is a long and tedious, and you have to be thorough and vigilant process. And when you just don't do it right, you get crap that comes out of it. And I think that's true for science or journalism or any number of things that where you're letting other things take over, just that attitude of how you approach it. Education being a very interesting topic. I think education, a lot of challenges for it. And I wish it would try and find a good basis to communicate that. I think it was at Harvard, was it Yale, where the faculty just put out a new like mission statement for what a study and a mission statement for how education should work. And I think that was a really interesting conversation. But funding, yeah, as you guys mentioned, funding is there too. Carolyn, is there anything?
I have to excuse myself.
Yeah, you go, Meryl.
I do have strangeness. Even though it's Saturday, I have another meeting in a couple of minutes. So y'all have a great day, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this event with you. So bye-bye.
Thanks for coming. See you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so tagline points out something here too when we think about the purpose of higher education. You know, a lot of people will focus on the value it brings to a career or what sort of value it brings to your lifetime salary and income, and that's certainly one way, a fairly narrow way of looking at it. What education does to make your life richer is a key part. Maybe help you make good or bad or more informed decisions, or just appreciate certain things more, which is why I think this informal education movement that we have and social media can help with that, is actually valuable when it's done well. But I think the misinformation part can be really problematic. Is there anything you guys want to say about misinformation of science, social media, or whatnot?
Oh my goodness, we could be here for hours. But one thing I was just putting in chat is that the idea of getting a ROI from education has only come about since about 1985. I took a good course in the history and philosophy of higher education at a doctoral level, and essentially that's where it came about. I mean, when I went to college, we didn't think about money. We didn't have money. And nobody thought about, oh, I'm going to get rich by getting an education. They thought that they would be able to better society. I mean, yes, okay, it was kind of a dream of the 60s and 70s, but it was never about, oh, I'm going to make more money if I get educated.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, to some degree, a lot of the early, like if you wanted to get a law degree or become a doctor, you had to go to college, then had to go to graduate school. So maybe not more or less money, but just for certain professions, there was this necessity to higher education.
Well,
we've really expanded that idea.
I remember the little thing about when you're in your kid and you go, you know, lawyer, doctor, Indian chief. Okay. That's what it was. What are you going to be when you grow up?
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I noticed. So when I was teaching and went to graduation ceremonies, and I had no appreciation of this until I went to that, is when you make going to college about getting a degree and then earning money and how do you earn more money? You know, like a third of our graduating class for the undergrad school was business majors. You know, so suddenly becoming a business major was becoming the popular thing because that's, in theory, people thought, oh, I'll go into business to make money, so I'll do a business degree. And I think to some degree that limits the thoughts and ideas that entrepreneurs and people can approach business with, but it also makes education kind of a strange pre-certification for something do you necessarily need a business degree to do business? So,
Well, and it leads to, we were talking about misinformation. It leads to misinformation. In other words, there is no ethics in business. The only ethics that it exists in business is reputation, perhaps. But in other words, when all you're thinking about is money, then it leads to, love of money is the root of all evil. And that's been around for thousands of years.
yeah, tagline. I like that idea. Education is an opportunity to just become more learned and become like a better version of yourself in some ways. Again, I like what Neuro said too, which is, education is about truth. And I think that that's certainly one way we want to approach the topics and the things that we present as educational material. But I will also say, I think a lot of times it's not about the journey of education is not necessarily about the truth. It's about becoming better at being able to recognize the truth and approach with a logical and thinking and seeking the truth and in a good and positive way. So I do like that. Carolyn, I think one thing you mentioned earlier back in the chat that I wanted to address was, different types of science become more or less popular over time. Becoming a high particle energy physicist or rocket scientist was certainly a big thing in the early 1900s. People loved chemistry at the time, but now biology has become a bigger thing. Is there anything more you want to ask the panelists about or comment on? Because right now, of course, computer science and then the merging of various fields with computer science is a hot topic. Well, so Neuro, I do think you point out something really interesting here with that. Going to an education, getting a formal education can definitely change your attitude about things, and hopefully that's in a good way. But it seems like with MBAs, maybe that goes the opposite way with their generosity. And I think that's one thing I found that challenging when I was a biology educator is that, there are people who believe that things that happen in biology that we call evolution are caused by a higher power. And that's their deeply held belief. And when you try and teach biology as a process of natural causes, that actually leads to a lot of philosophical conflict in the classroom. And that can be quite difficult to navigate. That is unfortunate, though, about MBAs. I would hope they also became, you think in some cases, more entrepreneurial. Thanks, Natalie. I think thanks for your contributions. I really liked your example with the AI and what's happening with that. I think that's a good positive example. Although it's kind of too bad we didn't talk more about Star Trek. In all honesty, anyone want to talk Star Trek before we have to go? Yeah, quite all right, Bill. Well, thanks for coming. It's always great to have people to participate. I think tagline, unless you want to make a closing statement or anybody else from the audience wants to pipe up with a comment or a question, I'll give you the floor for the last thing and we'll head out. If you want tagline. Ooh, I'm not hearing you, tagline.
Now I'm on. I'm sorry, I had trouble getting my mic to come on. I had an idea. I had a little back and forth with of ideas with friendly back and forth with Phil, and we were talking about the idea that there's nothing of opinion in science, that it's totally well founded. But I think there is a lot of opinion, but it gets weighed in as consensus, and I think that's not to be downplayed. That's a huge part of science. consensus and how it's attained, and the debate that leads to consensus. And it reminded me of, we go around talking about the normal distribution, and everybody talks about the bell-shaped curve, and just assumes, it seems to me, that every distribution out there is probably a bell-shaped curve unless stated otherwise. And the fact is, it's probably about as realistic as the concept of an ideal gas in physical chemistry, which is a model for developing some things in thermodynamics, but there's no such thing as an ideal gas. There's some elements that behave a little more like an ideal gas than others, but they all diverge from it and one way or another. And the thing that's really, really cool is no matter what distribution of data you have, if you take any distribution in the universe, if you take samples, a collection of samples from it at random, and get a mean for that, and then another collection of samples and get a mean for that one, a mean meaning an average, and do this with a large large number of samples, then the distribution of the averages will approach that of a perfect normal distribution. That's called the central limit theorem. And in a sense, intuitively, I think that when you have groups of scientists working and trying to interpret and coming to a consensus one way or another, sometimes the debate gets carried out in textbooks after the journals have been written and refined over decades. But in a sense, it relates, in my thinking, to the central limit theorem, these different subgroups and their consensus get averaged together and you end up with a true mean. I think that it is the basis for science as an approach being the most effective way human beings have ever had to gain knowledge about reality. And I'll stop at that. Thank you for letting me close.
Well, I do think probably one of the most important things that we have come to understand about the human brain is that there are certain things it does wrong. And again, that's just because of our history, but understanding distributions and what those really can and can't tell you is one of the biggest things, right? So yeah, bimodal, I really feel like kindergartners should be taught about bimodal distributions as a way to grasp those concepts. So yeah, I think thanks for that commentary, Tagline. Always appreciate some of your wider perspectives on things. These issues with illogic can be treated both with a combination of training, educating, but also involves and requires the willingness to apply them. So Carolyn, thanks for that example. I had that jar example is a good one. I do wonder. I'm just saying our education typically doesn't formally start till kindergarten, so that's when they should start doing it as soon as possible, really. But as a parent, you can, or maybe Dora the Explorer should talk more about bimodal. Well, yeah, and to be fair, the ability to think incorrectly in some cases or to make mistakes has helped advance science. Yeah, I think again, I'll end with my own kind of teacup analogy, which is actually not even my own. It's something that Bruce Lee used to tell his students, is that when they would come to him to learn about Jeet Kune Do, or some of the other stuff that he was synthesizing as his own forms of the martial arts, is he always told his students they need to empty the teacup, right? That your ability to learn something does require getting rid of preconceptions and other stuff. Now, I think that's true, but there's also this place where a lot of science and a lot of our knowledge is built upon other foundations. And so it's trying to navigate the good and bad out of that I think brings us to where we hopefully can achieve the optimum. Science Circle is a part of that. Being open, being willing to come here and discuss is all part of that. So thank you all for participating. And yeah, let's have some tea. Let's get to our days. Thank you all for coming, and I bid you